Greetings, my name is Kelly and I am 22 years old. I was fortunate to grow up in a very loving family, and I shared an especially close bond with my mom. Sadly, when I was just 11 years old, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away 3 years later. She left behind her clothes, some precious family heirloom jewelry, and a fund for my college education. However, none of these could ever replace her presence in my life. Losing her was heartbreaking, and it profoundly affected my dad, Jeffrey, and me. My mom's passing took a toll on the relationship between my dad and me. We found it hard to communicate and slowly drifted apart, feeling like I had lost both of my parents at the same time. Then, about a year and a half later, my dad shared that he had started seeing someone named Martha. Although I felt it was too soon, seeing him happy made me feel better, so I supported him. They got married 7 months after he introduced her to me. Martha was right, and I was genuinely pleased for my dad, but I couldn't form a bond with her. I was old enough to understand that she could never take my mom's place, and I made it clear to my dad that I would never see her as my mother. He understood and only asked that I treat her with respect as his wife, which I agreed to, hoping he had communicated my feelings to Martha as well. However, it seemed either he hadn't or Martha chose to ignore his words because she started imposing her beliefs and values on me right after they married. Whenever I resisted, she would complain to my dad, who, desiring peace, would ask us to sort it out ourselves. One particular issue was her demand for me to stop reading my favorite book series, claiming it was childish. Despite her insistence, I stood my ground, explaining how much joy it brought me and that I didn't care about others' opinions. Our disagreements highlighted the tension between us, especially when she expected me to treat her as a mother, a role I firmly believed she could not fulfill. At that moment, I made it crystal clear to her, I see you solely as my dad's wife, nothing more. Accept it or don't, but don't ever imagine you could take my mother's place. You will not force me to call you mom, and you certainly can't take away my books. But ignoring my protests, she declared she'd ensure I'd call her mom and, as a first step, confiscated my favorite books. Frustrated, I threatened to tell my dad, curious to see whom he'd support, his wife or his daughter. Yet, she just smirked and walked away with my books in tow. I tried reaching out to my dad for help, but he brushed me off, claiming he was too exhausted from work to mediate between Martha's and my issues. He suggested I handle it on my own. That hurt. It was then I began to see the priorities in my dad's life: his job, his new wife, his ideal home, everything but me. He'd never taken my side or even attempted to mediate a fair discussion with Martha. So, I decided to keep a low profile. The constant rebellion wasn't changing anything, and I realized the best thing for me would be to move out as soon as I hit 19. Dad wouldn't mind, and Martha's opinions were irrelevant to me. For the next year, I barely spoke up or responded to Martha's provocations, even when she tried to parade me as her daughter in front of her friends, or demanded I call her mom in their presence, leading to inevitable arguments afterward. Yet, I remained indifferent. Perhaps Dad was trying to respect my one request by not forcing the issue, or maybe he just couldn't be bothered. Martha's frustration with me only grew, her disdain palpable. But as soon as I turned 19, I was ready to leave. My mom had left me enough money to get through college comfortably, and I had secured a scholarship. Moving out was my escape, my chance to start fresh without the constant tension and battles at home. Leaving home happened so suddenly that it caught both my dad and Martha by surprise. Not long after I settled into my new place, Martha called, upset and questioning how I could just leave like that. I'm 19, I reminded her, highlighting that at my age, it's normal for people to move out and start living independently. She complained about how upset they were, to which I pointed out that she had always urged me to act like my peers, who were also moving out at this stage of their lives. When she tried to guilt-trip me by saying my dad was sad and worried because of my departure, I suggested that if that were true, he could reach out to me directly. Martha then insisted on her role in my life, claiming a right to know why I left so abruptly. I had to make it clear to her, she was not my mother, and her attempts to control my life were the reason for my departure. Despite her denials, it was clear to me that her efforts to dictate my actions were unwavering. After hanging up on Martha, I felt a profound sense of freedom. For the first time, I could make choices about simple things like what to wear or what to eat without criticism. I relished the liberty to go out without having to plan days ahead. My newfound independence allowed me to enjoy simple pleasures, like going bowling, a pastime Martha had absurdly labeled as too provocative. In the following years, my communication with Dad and Martha was minimal. If they really cared, I figured they would make an effort to reach out. Time flew by, and during my college years, I thrived academically and became well known on campus. Conversations with my dad became monthly check-ins, during which he mentioned that Martha had nearly stopped bringing me up. Yet, on the occasions my name did come up, it seemed to stir some reaction. Martha's reaction to any mention of me hadn't changed much. She'd quickly become upset and shift the conversation. However, my dad started to initiate more calls, perhaps finding some solace in our conversations amidst Martha's constant antics. It felt like the distance between us had somewhat bridged the gap, making our relationship a bit closer. One day, Dad called unexpectedly. The conversation quickly turned to how I was managing my studies and his casual update on Martha's latest mood swings. He mentioned a call from Uncle Tyler, a relative we hadn't heard from in a while, who was planning his 53rd birthday celebration and wanted us there. Excited at the prospect of reuniting with Uncle Tyler, I was initially hesitant when Dad suggested I stay with them. My reluctance stemmed from past experiences where Dad had failed to support me against Martha's behaviors. Dad, sensing my hesitation, earnestly asked me to give it another chance, revealing he'd been attending therapy to become a better father. This admission took me by surprise and sparked a glimmer of hope that things might be different this time. He promised to stand by me if any issues arose with Martha, a pledge he had never made before. Encouraged by his commitment and the noticeable change in his approach, I agreed to stay with them during Uncle Tyler's birthday celebration. Though I remained cautious, not fully convinced yet willing to see if Dad's promises would hold true, I found myself genuinely looking forward to the visit. This would be a chance to not only reconnect with my family, but also to see if the newfound dynamics between Dad and me could truly make a difference. Although the prospect of being around Martha wasn't appealing to me, the excitement of seeing Uncle Tyler again overshadowed it. Uncle Tyler, my mom's older brother, held a special place in our hearts. He stepped in to raise my mom after their parents passed away, and when I was born, he was incredibly loving, showering me with affection and gifts. However, life's responsibilities, including joining the police academy and starting his own family, along with the profound impact of my mom's passing, led him to distance himself for a while. We hardly knew of his well-being, except for occasional updates from his wife. Then, when my dad remarried and Martha entered our lives, she insisted we sever ties with my mom's side of the family. At that point, our connection with them was already minimal, so distancing further wasn't difficult. I suspected Martha would be displeased about us rekindling ties with my mom's family, and probably even more so about us visiting them. But it didn't matter to me. I was just thrilled to see my dad stand up to her for once. After my midterms, I returned home, bringing along one of my mom's dresses and some of her jewelry to wear at Uncle Tyler's birthday. It felt like a way to have her presence there with us. My dad picked me up from the airport, mentioning that Martha was out for the day, which meant we had some quality time to ourselves before the celebration. Our visit to Uncle Tyler's was emotional, given the long time apart, but thankfully, Martha wasn't there to dampen the mood. The evening was wonderful, filled with stories about my mom and her family. I learned that Uncle Tyler had been promoted to sergeant at his precinct, a fact that filled me with pride. I shared tales of my college life, and we all enjoyed a good laugh together. Returning home past midnight, Martha was waiting up for us, visibly displeased by our long absence. Yet my dad simply told her to relax, explaining we had spent time with family we hadn't seen in years. It was a moment that showed how much we valued reconnecting with our roots, regardless of the tension it might have caused with Martha. Upon returning from our visit to Uncle Tyler's, Martha confronted us with a mix of accusation and resentment, questioning the newfound connection with my mom's family. I tried explaining that it's possible to belong to more than one family. But Martha took offense, insisting on her role as my mother, in a way that felt both possessive and dismissive of my feelings. The tension escalated quickly as Martha demanded respect and obedience, claiming a mother's authority over me. Her words struck a chord, especially since she hadn't shown any concern for me while I was away at college, a stark contrast to how a real mother would act. In her view, my education, funded by my late mother's savings, and my independence were signs of disrespect. Martha even admitted to wanting me out of the house, labeling me a spoiled brat, a comment that pushed the situation to its limit. Thankfully, my dad intervened before things could get worse, suggesting we end the night and resume the conversation calmly in the morning. After retreating to my room, the sound of an argument between Dad and Martha continued, culminating in a door slam that suggested one of them had stormed out. I hoped it was Martha who had left, but I didn't check. After showering and preparing for bed, I noticed something amiss in my room. My suitcase, which I had left zipped up, was now open and, to my horror, all of my mom's jewelry was missing. Panic set in as I realized these irreplaceable items were gone. Trying to stay calm, I went to confront Martha, who claimed Dad had left after their argument. Her presence in the house raised suspicions about her possibly entering my room. When I questioned her about it, the implication hung heavily in the air. Was Martha behind the disappearance of my mom's jewelry, or was there another explanation? The situation had taken a distressing turn, highlighting not just the personal tensions within our household, but also the invasion of my privacy and the loss of something deeply meaningful to me. After discovering my mom's jewelry missing, I confronted Martha, who denied entering my room or taking anything. Yet, her behavior, her sweating and inconsistent stories about looking for my father, raised my suspicions further. It was clear to me that she was involved in the disappearance of the jewelry, a desperate attempt to erase my mom's memory from our lives, especially after our recent argument. Feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion, I decided not to confront Martha further. Instead, I reached out to my dad, who was shocked by the news, and hurried back home, promising to support me in resolving the situation. He also mentioned he had commitments the next morning and wouldn't be around for breakfast. Despite everything, I was too tired to stay awake any longer and eventually fell asleep around 2 a.m. The following morning, Martha conspicuously avoided me, likely fearful of the consequences of her actions. After breakfast, I called Uncle Tyler to discuss the situation. I shared with him not only about the argument with Martha, but also about her taking my mom's jewelry. Uncle Tyler was appalled and encouraged me to take legal action. Determined, I decided to report the theft to the police. Uncle Tyler, being a part of the police force, assured me he would handle the case with the seriousness it deserved. I made my way to the police station, ready to file the report and hopeful that justice would be served. Uncle Tyler's support in this matter was a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in facing Martha's manipulations, and that there were still people who valued justice and family bonds over petty grievances and malicious actions. Upon arriving at the police station, I detailed everything about the stolen jewelry and provided a copy of my mother's will, which explicitly left those items to me. I explained my suspicions about Martha being responsible for the theft, and Uncle Tyler corroborated the timeline of my dad's whereabouts, confirming they were together at the park the previous evening. After filing the report, I returned home, and shortly after, the police arrived to conduct their investigation. Martha, answering the door, visibly paled upon seeing them. The officers questioned her about her actions the night before and, armed with a search warrant, proceeded to search her room. To no surprise, they discovered all of my jewelry there. Confronted with the evidence, Martha turned to me, tears in her eyes, attempting to garner sympathy. However, recalling my mom and seeing Uncle Tyler there strengthened my resolve. It was then that my dad arrived, witnessing the scene unfold. Martha sought his support, only to be met with his cold dismissal as he presented her with divorce papers. Her pleas turned to sobs as she faced the consequences of her actions. Martha then attempted to apologize to me, admitting to her wrongdoing, but framing it as an impulsive act rather than a deliberate attempt to hurt me. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she wanted to return to the way things were, hopeful that it would sway my dad as well. Her apology seemed driven more by the situation she found herself in than by genuine remorse. It was a moment of reckoning, underscoring the divide her actions had created and the long path to healing that lay ahead if it was even possible. I made it clear that my ability to forgive was not tied to my dad's decisions, but after everything Martha had put me through, forgiveness was off the table. Her actions had caused me immense pain over the years, and facing consequences now seemed only a fraction of what she deserved. When she lashed out, calling me selfish and expressing relief that we weren't actually related, her true colors showed once more. At that moment, Uncle Tyler intervened, removing her from the situation and allowing me to feel a sense of liberation, knowing she would no longer be part of our lives. My dad later shared with me that he had been considering a divorce for some time, spurred by his reflections in therapy. He had hesitated, fearing the loneliness that might follow, but Martha's behavior that night made his decision clear. Since then, we've been rebuilding our relationship, slowly healing from the turmoil. In the aftermath, Martha faced legal consequences for her actions, receiving a fine of $1,000, which was the maximum penalty. This chapter's closure has allowed me to embrace a newfound sense of freedom, with the support of my true family around me. The experience has taught us the value of unity and understanding, bringing my dad and me closer than we've been in years. Life now feels more hopeful, filled with genuine happiness in the presence of loved ones.